So that's why we're stuck with the number. I think it's around 75,000 federal employees that accepted it, which is roughly 3.5%. I know certain agencies, they've been instructed to reduce by 50%, and there's multiple thousands of people that work within that agency. That's a significant cut. There's over 12,000 people that were fired that were on probation. And it's not for performance. It's not for conduct. It's simply because they were easy target. So that's exactly what the administration did. The opportunities have been cut. I would say roughly they've been cut in half. Anybody who wants to jump right now, you could definitely jump.
I have a special guest here today, Armand, who is an amazing expert in an area that some of y'all may be familiar with, some of you may not be. I mean, I know a lot of people were offered this buyout, so that's a hint, talking about government employees and this amazing space of federal government and government service. So I'm excited to have you here, Armand, to help all of them, all the people out there in this amazing space.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here. So I know you have an active YouTube channel.
Correct.
And you talk a lot about being a government employee. I know going back to way before I got involved in government contracting, I thought, hey, somebody gets a job with the federal government, you have a job for life, it's an amazing job, and you have an amazing kind of easy breezy kind of life unless you're involved in something high profile or something of that nature.
Yeah, there's a wide spectrum of government jobs. There's over 2 million federal employees currently in the federal workforce. There are jobs that are, let's say, more heavily administrative, where perhaps you don't have to exert yourself as much. There are other jobs, just like in the trades, you have your plumbers and your welders and your construction workers and your not housekeeper, but essentially the VA, where they're cleaning up the hotel rooms and things like that. So there's a wide spectrum of different jobs. There's currently there's over 300 different jobs within the federal government. But when a lot of people look at it, they look at it and say, okay, this is safety. This is stability. This is security. And one of the biggest things is this is a pension. This is guaranteed money. Once you reach a certain age, and for me and you, that age is probably 57. Once you reach that age, then as long as you stay alive, you will be receiving a paycheck. And on average right now, that's a little over $2,000 a month. So that attracts people.
Wow. And you know, the thing is about that, who else does that other than maybe teachers, maybe some manufacturing, but there are very few employers in the greatest country ever, the United States, who offers some type of pension or that type of security.
Yeah, definitely. Number one is the military. And I did 20 years in the military. So that was one of the appeals that brought me into the military. But that's number one. Number two, you have your state, county, and city government jobs, right? They're below the federal level. They still offer the pension. Then you have, well, this falls under city, but your police officers, in some cases, your firefighters, they have decent pensions. And then surprisingly, we have utility companies. Utility companies offer pensions, but it's not as much as if you look back 50, 60, 70 years ago, where you had like 25, 30% of all jobs were offering pensions. And now every company has seemed to shift for the most part, and they just want to give you a 401k, which is great.
Right.
If you actually contribute to it, if you know the strategies on how to be aggressive or how to be more stable at different phases of your life, if you know the stock market, or if you're willing to get a financial advisor, that could be great. But then you're stuck in a position where, okay, I want to retire this year, let's say hypothetically. What is the market doing? Are we in a recession? Because if we are, that's a negative 30% in some cases, where you had $1 million, now you have 700,000, and you aren't planning for that. So you're at the whims of the stock market. What's going on in the market?
Right, which, can be very challenging for many. And I would say something else that seems to have been a little challenging is with all of this that's going on with new administration and all these rapid changes, a beautiful buyout was offered. I know that, many were unaware or maybe overlooked what happened during the Clinton administration, but it seemed like an 8-month kind of buyout was quite reasonable. Could you really speak to that? Because I think people are left confused, wondering why didn't more people take this?
Yeah. Okay. First, I want to say that when I say the words buyout, there's a lot of pushback. A lot of people say this is not a buyout, and I tend to agree with them, because if you look at the phrase buyout, what we're talking about is essentially like a severance package for you to leave immediately. And the government has a tool for this. It's called VSIP, VSIP, voluntary separation incentive payment. That currently has a cap of $25,000. That's not that much because let me go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but when we talk about downsizing the federal government, people come out from all corners of everywhere and they're like, well, hey, Ronald Reagan did this. Bill Clinton did this. He's a Democrat. Bill Clinton did it. So why don't you have a problem with Bill Clinton? He laid off, quote, laid off about 400,000 people. That's significant. So what's the difference with President Trump and Bill Clinton? And the difference is pretty clear. Number one, Bill Clinton had congressional support. It went through Congress. He had a 99-1 vote in the Senate. 99% of the Senate voted for it. And in addition to that, we're talking about 1994, $25,000 in 1994. That's the equivalent of $55,000 right now. Because if you index it for inflation, it is actually $55,000. But they haven't changed it. It's still, if you go to OPM.gov, it's still $25,000. They haven't indexed that for inflation. So that's what people are saying is the buyout. That would be separation incentive. That would be the buyout. Now, what President Trump is doing doesn't fall under that category. What he's doing has never seen before. What he's doing is unprecedented. And he's essentially saying, like you alluded to earlier, go ahead and accept the deferred resignation program. Say that you're going to resign. And then you have about 3 to 4 weeks where you're going to transition your duties to somebody else in your office. And then the agency is going to put you on administrative leave, paid administrative leave until September 30th. So in reality, the way that would work, it wouldn't be quite 8 months. It would really be, in best case scenario, it would be 7 months of your full pay and benefits. This means you're still contributing to your 401k equivalent, which is a TSP. You're still doing that. You're building up credit in the government. So it goes towards your pension later on. If you have 5 years or more in the federal government, you're fully vested in a pension. So at 62 years old, you can draw a pension, even if you've only been 5, 6, 7, 8 years in the government. So that's another thing. Now, people didn't like this. For one thing, it's unprecedented, right? So when it's unprecedented, people are like, okay, where is this rooted in law? Where am I getting a guarantee? There is no guarantee. So what you had on the other side, you had Democratic senators in Congress yelling that this was illegal. That's what you had. You had representatives in Congress urging people that this was illegal. Now that adds to the confusion. Then you have unions saying, don't take it. Unions were emailing federal employees every other day saying, don't take it. Be careful. Then you had law firms that specialize in these type of situations. They were saying, don't take it. So you have 3 distinct bodies. You have unions, law firms, and senators saying, do not take it. And then over here, you have the president, and you also had the head of agencies, because at this point, the president has pretty much appointed the leadership in every agency. So you had the head of agency, you had the president, and you also have your HR office, and they're saying, hey, you can take it. So it's a battle between these groups. They're fighting each other. And the average federal employee is like, well, I don't even know what's going on. So they're nervous. Even if they wanted to take it, they're nervous and they're waiting for more information to come out. Then a judge halts the whole program. They're like, hey, we're going to freeze this entire thing, which adds more to the confusion. So we had federal employees saying, okay, well, let's see what the judge rules. Does the judge rule that this is legal? Is it illegal? Let me just wait to hear what happens. The judge allows the program to continue, and about 1 hour later, they cut the program off. So nobody who wanted to join it that was waiting for the judge to make their decision, nobody could join it. So that's why we're stuck with the number. I think it's around 75,000 federal employees that accepted it, which is roughly 3.5% of the federal workforce. Now, what comes next, a lot of people are guessing, is okay, by agency, they're planning for RIFs right now, reduction in forces. So depending on the agency, they could open up early retirement again. And that's a whole nother thing. That's VERA, Voluntary Early Retirement Authority. That's where you have to be 50 years old with 20 years of service or 25 years of service. Doesn't matter how old you are. That's early retirement. So they might open up early retirement, and then they might actually open up what I was referring to earlier, VSIP, with the 25 grand. Now it can go up to 40 grand in some situations, but generally it's capped at 25. So we could see those things coming out. So that's kind of my perspective. I talk to federal employees every day, and I talked to people that were saying, hey, I wanted to accept it. I was just waiting for the judge's verdict, and that was it. And now one lady was 63 years old. She's eligible for Social Security. I don't know if she wants to take it, but she was seriously leaning towards accepting the program, and that's not possible anymore.
No, I mean, and I could only imagine, especially given we engage quite regularly with government employees too, and they receive lots of messages around don't take it, read things multiple times, ponder. We did have someone that's connected to a contract that we've had for over 10 years who decided to take the offer. And I believe they will begin that phase the beginning of next month. But it has been intriguing as a government contractor to be privy to this because, in addition to this offer, is the well, surprise, you got to go back to work. You got to physically come into an office. So, what have you seen when it comes to that from those that you've engaged with? What are their thoughts on going back to wherever the physical office is for them?
Yeah, so the return to office thing is interesting because what we've seen is the first component of it is telework. The individuals that were teleworking the majority of the week and they were coming in periodically throughout the week to do their duties at the office, at the agency. Now, what has occurred, this is by agency. Once again, the agencies have a lot of room for interpretation, but all agencies, I believe, at this point, their leadership is aligned with the administration, so they're going to conform. But there are some agencies that are taking longer to do it. But most of them, starting next week, starting next Monday, that's the day where individuals are supposed to come in 5 days a week. Now, this impacts people that were teleworking. For your people that were 100% remote, if they lived within 60 miles of an agency's office, they were required to come in as well. For people that live further, in certain circumstances, there's other plans where the government agency might decide to lease a building where they're going to have to figure it out because the intent is to be in a building. Even if you have to lease or buy a building, they need to figure out a building. Now, the caveat to that, the exception to that right now is military spouses. So there's been a lot of back and forth with the administration about what to do with the military spouses because oftentimes military spouses they could be in somewhat remote regions with their military service member, with their spouse, and they have to jump around every 2 or 3 years. So it seems for the time being they're making an exception for those people. People that fall under that category are exempt, or they should be. And another category is reasonable accommodations. So that falls under an ADA, that falls under the Disability Act. So those individuals should be protected as well. Those are the two categories that I'm aware of right now that are protected. But for telework, no, I mean, they're bringing them in. They're definitely bringing them in.
And has that led to any have you seen that people are using that as, uh, you know, kind of a reason to potentially seek magic elsewhere? Maybe they declined the offer. Maybe not old enough to retire. They're still in this phase of maybe disbelief or just taking in what's happening. But are they now thinking, man, I don't know if I want to do this anymore?
Well, so when it comes to people that are trying to leave the federal government, the when the offer came, I made a speculation. I assumed that there'd be three main groups that would take the offer. The first group I thought would be probationary employees because people on probation, they were not secure. They were not on firm footing.
No.
Now, unfortunately, even some of the people that took the offer that were under probation, they got cut. Right now, as of this morning when I last checked, there's over 12,000 people that were fired that were on probation. And it's not for performance, it's not for conduct, it's not for their job. It's simply because they were easy target. They were low hanging fruit. It was easy to chop them and get rid of them. So that's exactly what the administration did. So those are individuals on probation. The second one was early retirement. So if you're getting ready to retire, this is the extra bump or nudge that you need to go ahead and jump and, submit your retirement paperwork. The third, I thought, would be individuals with high in demand IT skills that had a strong network that could pivot and they could jump into perhaps defense contracting or they can jump back into the private sector. So I do know people that have like cybersecurity background that were like, hey, I'm not sticking around for this clown show. I'm gonna go ahead and jump off right now. And they did that. So those are the only group of people that I know that were really serious about jumping.
It seems from kind of what I've come across, again, my perspective is as a contractor, there are those that I think that their disbelief is this big cloud. It's almost like the Peanuts character. You had the character with the little cloud that always followed him around. It's like this cloud of like they know something's coming, but then they didn't take the leap. They're kind it's like, I don't think it's gonna rain on my head. I suspect, and, I'd love your thoughts on this, that those reduction in workforce, it's gonna be pretty severe.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's over 12,000 of right now. They're going to continue to fire. They haven't even really touched DoD yet. DoD is kind of like the last agency standing,
Mhm.
and probably certain components of DHS. It's going to be. It looks like it's going to be severe when we're looking at the executive order that was mandating the RIF plan, the organization for the RIF. So I know certain agencies have been instructed to reduce by 50%. I don't want to name the agency, but I know certain agencies they've been instructed to reduce by 50%, and there's multiple thousands of people that work within that agency. That's a significant cut, and that's going to cause some heartache. But before I continue to talk about RIFs, I just want to mention something before I forget it, and that is with the return to office, right? There's a part that I missed, and this is what I think is somewhat important, especially if you're a federal employee. What I've noticed that people are doing is certain individuals are talking with their supervisor to modify their schedule. So in the government, there's three different schedules, generally speaking. Number one is what everyone assumes, is normal or typical. It's 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. You come in Monday through Friday. But there are alternates to that. There's something called 410s, where you come in 4 days and you get 10-hour days, and that's 40 hours. So that way you have a 3-day weekend every single weekend. So people who are under that schedule, they can still do that. So they can still get a 3-day weekend every single weekend. And that's really appealing. That's appealing right now in a time like this, where all of a sudden you had time, you had work-life balance, and now you don't. So that is appealing. I know somebody else who is okay, you have to come in 5 days a week, and that's fine. But they're able to adjust their schedule in which, let's say, Tuesday and Thursdays, they go home at lunch. So they are still coming into the office, but they're working a reduced day. So that increases because they have other responsibilities outside of the workplace when it comes to family and everything else. So there are people doing that as well. A lot of people have a lot of sick leave. Sick leave never expires in the federal government. You could just hold on to that thing for 20, 30 years. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. People have sick leave. So I know some people are considering taking a sick day every other Monday or every Monday so that they have a three they have a 3 day. And they can use that, to a certain extent they can use it liberally as they would like. So that's kinda helping them manage the sudden shift when it comes to the work culture, to the demands of the office. It's helping them a little bit. But getting back to the RIF has a lot of people worried, definitely. I was talking to a lady from the Department of Homeland Security, and, I helped her get her job. In many cases, I helped these people get their jobs, and now they're fired. They're reaching back out to me on LinkedIn, and they're shooting me a message like, "Hey, Armand, I really appreciate everything you did last August, but now I'm unemployed because they cut my position." And there's a lot of real emotions attached with that. There's just not just letters, it's just not words I'm reading on a screen. There are real emotions that they're telling me they're crying in meeting rooms. A supervisor, GS15, she hired 5 new people over the last 6 months. All six of them. All six of them. The entire that little program is gone. It's gone now. And she was in tears when she first heard about it. And then she had to let her people know that, a lot of them are in tears. Everyone's crying together in the conference room. So it really has serious impact. And she was taking a bet, a gamble, a risk when it comes to jumping into the federal workforce. She had a secure job. She didn't have to do this, but she was thinking about it, thinking about her future, thinking about the pension, thinking about the benefits, the work life balance, her family situation. And it made sense. So she took the jump. This is before the election. She took the jump. And now where she's at now is, she's terminated. She doesn't have any security. She's looking for her next position. I'm sure she's going to find another job. And with most federal employees, I would say they have the skills to be marketable in the private sector. They're going to be fine in the private sector. The government really employs less than 2% of Americans. So there's a lot of backlash and people saying, the federal government's not supposed to be a work program. The federal government isn't supposed to be a jobs program where they just hire everybody. They don't hire everybody. They're hiring less than 2%. And a lot of them are veterans. 30% of the workforce, they're veterans. So, I mean, that's significant. That's, if you look at the federal workforce as 2 million, what is that? That's at least 600,000. That's over a 500,000 veterans that have already served their country in one capacity. And they decided to pivot and they made an active decision to go ahead and serve it in another capacity. And now they're getting these random emails saying they're being terminated for low performance, which is not true in many cases. It's copy and paste language that they're just shooting it out to everyone. And that is offensive. That disparages the entire federal workforce. And people, even if you stay, even if you love your job, your morale has decreased. You start asking yourself that question in the morning, looking in the mirror: am I in a worthwhile job? How stable, secure? How do the American people look at me? Well, the leader of the country doesn't respect you. Half of the country would wish that you would be fired. So what does that make you think about the position that you're currently in? Maybe it's time for a career shift. That's what a lot of people are thinking.
Yeah, a lot of people are. They're thinking of a career shift, or they want to get into government contracting, which is a nice pivot, or work for a government contractor. They could always work for a SpaceX, Lockheed Martin, Amazon type, Raytheon. I mean, there's a lot of options out there. And it definitely impacts morale to be on eggshells, to wonder, am I next? I just hired somebody. I know we have a client where they hired several people probably within the last couple of years. And I get it. It's definitely very tough. You know, and for those who, one thing, just kind of going back to the work arrangement, one thing I've noticed on the contractor side is we've been very fortunate, and we had very specific language about place of performance, which is very common, especially with what I call staffing type contracts. And one other thing I noticed with one of our federal clients is that they were wondering if they could receive a change in their pay because they were going to end up working at a different location, which would mean that they would get more money. Is that something that you've come across?
If you're talking in the context of the federal government, absolutely. There's over 50 pay charts. So 70% of the federal workforce is under the GS pay scale. So GS1, GS15, 10 steps. So it doesn't matter. Let's say you're GS12, step 5, for example. If you're in California, you're earning 40% more money than if you were in Mississippi. The same position, the same rank. I'm going to say rank, but basically the same pay grade and step. There's a huge difference depending on where you live in the country. And then there's other differences as well. There could be a special salary rate depending on your job, depending on the agency, depending on the mission. But generally speaking, if you're a GS12 coming from California and you're doing a lateral move, like not a promotion, but a lateral move to a different state, you're probably taking a pay decrease, a significant pay decrease. So that's true. And one thing real quick, touching on contracting, I don't focus on contracting, but what I do know, I'm not trying to attack contracting, but what I do know is that for every one federal employee, there's at least two contractors. There's at least two contractors, and the contracts are very expensive. That's subjective, it's relative. But to me, they're very expensive. So if you're looking for areas to cut, it doesn't just have to come from your federal employee. You can reevaluate some of those contracts that you have and eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse that way. So, the federal workforce is less than 10%. Some estimates have it like around 6 to 8% of the national budget. So even if you snap your fingers and cut it by half, the savings that you have achieved would represent probably close to 3 to 4%. And you still have the other 94, 95, 96%. Now you got to figure out where are you really going to make some, efficiency changes throughout the national budget, because so much of the money goes to so many different places, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, foreign aid, defense, all these other areas. And the workforce is not that significant, but it seems like somebody needed an enemy. Somebody needed a target. Like, these are the individuals. This is why you're in pain right now. Are you upset about Ukraine getting $100 billion? This is why you're in pain. Are you upset about people tapping your phone line? This is why you're in pain. Are you upset about your IRS? Are they taxing you too much? Well, let's paint the federal workforce as a villain, and let's get together and attack the villain. That's the feeling.
It definitely is. And there are situations that made it easy. Like, let's hire all these IRS agents to come after you. Let's probe if you've had a Cash App, Venmo transaction with $600. I mean, it made it pretty easy to make someone out to be a villain. And, the Department of Government Efficiency One thing that they've done is have pinpointed contracts that they've deemed should no longer be around and need to find magic elsewhere, which has happened. I also am well aware that as a contractor, and I say this from a place of love and light, I have been told by many clients, many government agencies, defense and federal, the reason they get things done is because of us. And so I know that one of the benefits with contractors is we get chosen, where with a lot of government employees, they get who they get. And I can't say that's the case in every single agency. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting from the perspective I've had and from the experiences I've encountered, that's been the case. And so the way that they've made the most out of what they need to accomplish within their departments have been through contracts. Not frivolous contracts, not gender reassignment in the Ukraine or weird things with bureaus of prison, because I came across a lot of those contracts. Or even there's a researcher at Wright-Patterson who was paying a female sex worker through a contract. And it's something you can look on Google and find all about him.
In
So
Crate?
he was paying a sex worker in the States at Wright-Patterson. Yeah,
Oh,
he was paying her through his research budget, through a prime contractor to get to her, and
my God.
he passed before they went forward with pressing any charges, and she was actually an FTE on 2 different contracts, full-time equivalent. So, I am very well aware of the outrageous things that have occurred in government contracting, and so I'm all about just looking at ways to make reductions because, like you said, it is frustrating when certain things happen. But at the same time, I know the blessings that having a government job brings. I've had several of my team members become government employees. And
Yeah.
it's an honor to experience that. And I'm just curious, now there's this freeze on hiring. What about those who maybe they're in college or they're somewhere in their life and they're like, "Hey, I would love to work for the government." What do you say to those people who are like, "I still wanna work for the government. I'll wait out the freeze."
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I just want to address the comment that you made earlier. I think you're right. When it comes to different people perform differently depending on who you're interacting with. There are times I work directly with a lot of contractors, and a lot of them are really good and they're efficient and they're quick and they get back to me and they're always communicating. And some of them work crazy long hours. And being in the federal government, a lot of jobs, it's hard to paint the entire thing with one brush because there's so many different jobs out there. There's federal law enforcement, there's prison guards, there's all kinds of people out there. But when I'm talking mainly about the administrative folks in Washington, D.C. I think those are the ones who've been especially vilified. I've spoken and interacted with individuals that are federal employees that are also very highly productive. And the great thing I think about federal employees, where their competitive advantage can be at times, is they are continuity. Those individuals aren't like just leaving. A lot of the times, you will have a cluster at least in that office in the federal agency that's been around since the time where it was okay to smoke in a government building back in the 80s. They've been around. So they're like historians and they could tell you the whole history and they know where everything is at. So for continuity purposes, that is one aspect where I think they benefit. And it's really easy to fall into the stereotype of all federal employees are lazy, all civil servants are lazy. I don't think that's true. Obviously, there's lazy people anywhere, anywhere. Walmart employs 2.1 million. It's about the same. Walmart employs about the same as the federal government worldwide, 2.1 million. And if you look at the bottom 10% of Walmart, I'm sure they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm sure they're smoking drugs in the break room. They're doing it. You know what I mean? When the store closes, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff down the aisles. If you look at the bottom 10%, you're always going to find issues. That's the only thing. Now, to get back to what you're asking me, what do you tell the individual that was once considering a government job? My goodness, because listen, where we're at right now, if a person is still considering a government job, it's a little bit of a surprise. Because if you have the aptitude, if you have the skills and abilities, you're looking at the government as a volatile option. Maybe the pension's enough to draw some people, but other people are going to be like, you know what? This might not be the year. Maybe this might not be the administration. Maybe I should just wait until the next administration. There's going to be a lot of people on the sidelines that were just kind of considering it, and they're not going to be attracted to it anymore. But let's say we have somebody who is just committed to the mission, like they love the EPA. I've talked to people that just love the EPA because of the environmental impact that they can make. So or maybe an air traffic controller with the FAA, maybe you really want to do that. So there will always be those people that are gravitating for that reason. And then also the pensions is a heavy draw. So what I would say, generally speaking, is the federal hiring freeze, it's over in the middle to the end of April. So what you have is essentially about 2 months. You have 2 months until the federal hiring freeze should be lifted. That's according to what OPM said, because they're giving all the agencies time to submit a plan. And once the plan is submitted, OPM is going to gather them up. There's like 400 agencies. They're going to gather all the plans out. They're going to push out one grand plan. And once that's done, the hiring freeze is supposed to lift. So that's probably the third week of April, give or take a week. And then that should be lifted. Here's something else to consider. DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is not a real department, it's a commission. It's an initiative is what it is. But anyway, DOGE ends July 4th next year. It ends. That's the end date. And they're supposed to be so efficient that they're able to make that deadline. Now, if it gets extended, that's not going to look very good. But right now, it's in black and white. It says July 4th, 2026. Right? But listen, right now, there are thousands of jobs. If anyone watching this is like, hey, I really want to be a government employee, I want to get my pension. If you're watching this right now, get on USAJOBS.gov. There's over 6,000 jobs right now. That's just open to the public. Like, the requirement is you're a U.S. citizen. If you are not a resident, if you are a U.S. citizen, you can get on there right now today, and you're going to find thousands of jobs. This morning, there were over 6,000 jobs. Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security. What's the other one? VA, Veteran Affairs. HHS is still hiring in some capacity. FAA is still hiring in some capacity. But there are some agencies that are completely not hiring whatsoever, like the Department of Education and others.
USA.
But if a person wants to get into the government and you want to have like a stable type situation, I think they're going to be gravitated to DoD. Department of Defense is a good agency during this political climate. It's a good agency to get into. And luckily, that's 36% of all federal jobs. They're in the DoD. So you can do that. And there's over 300 different jobs. So there's something for pretty much anyone that wants to try to get in now. You don't have to wait until April.
No, but it's still encouraging. It's very encouraging, and I like that you highlighted the current end date for Doge. Who knows what will happen after? And the thing is that I think is beautiful about this space is the connection to politics. Things are always changing. I think that's I've found extremely exciting on the side of contracting is things are always changing. And the fact that there are thousands of jobs, are there opportunities for someone who is currently a government employee to look into transitioning to another government agency? Is that allowed right now, or is that also on hold or dependent on the agency?
You can absolutely do that. In fact, I'll take it a step further. If you accepted the deferred resignation program, if you accept that, you can apply to a job tomorrow, and you can go ahead and work for another agency if you wanted to. Let's say you were in the VA and you decided, I'm going to go ahead and resign. You resign from the VA. You start applying tonight for the DoD, and then in 3 months you get a job offer for the DoD. There's nothing wrong with that. And the document that you get that proves you are a federal employee, that's an SF-50. There's no negative derogatory remark on the SF-50 that's going to prevent you from seeking another federal position. There's no legal stipulation that says you cannot do it. You can absolutely do it if you want. But in that scenario, if you accepted the deferred resignation, you're getting paid until September 30th. If you accept another government job, that payment stops. So if you accept a government job in July or August, you're not going to get paid for September, not from your old agency, because you're going to be back on the books for the federal government, and you'll just be a regular federal employee getting their normal check. But yeah, anybody who wants to jump right now, you could definitely jump. The opportunities have been cut. I would say roughly they've been cut in half. So if I took a look at USAJOBS.gov in November, December, and there were 55% more openings. So it's been cut in half or a little bit less than half. Like I said, the main ones are DoD, DHS, VA, and they're still hiring.
Mm.
But a lot of people, I tell you what, in certain agencies, they don't even want to move because the thing is, if you move, in some cases, you're going to be put back on probation, and then you're a target. So nobody wants to be a target. So a lot of people, they're just trying to hunker down in their position, keep their head down, keep doing the good work, and hope for the best. When it comes to this administration, really, they're going to pull. This is my opinion. I have no idea.
Right.
They're gonna put their full weight and power to do as much change until the next congressional election. So that should be next November. Because there's a high probability that they're not going to retain both chambers of Congress. Not with what we're seeing currently. Usually, it's like a swing. It's like on the clock. Was it I can't even say the word. It starts with a P. You know the word? It's like
Pendulum.
you got it. Perfect. So it's like that. So it swings one way, it goes too far up, and it's like, okay, it's an overcorrection. Let's bring it on back down. It's just like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, I love that there's lots of it's like choose your adventure. There's lots of possible paths. And for those who this is your path, feel like you have to ride it out. For those of you where maybe it's not your path, you definitely can seek other opportunities. And for those who maybe want to be a little more entrepreneurial, to come over here for government contracting if that's your thing. But I love the fact that you help people with getting employment, especially with the federal government. How do people get in contact with you? What is the name of your channel? And I know you also mentioned you're on LinkedIn. Please share that with the audience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you for giving me the chance. So on YouTube, it's Armand Curet. One word, Armand Curet one. So if you run that search, you should be able to find the YouTube channel. On LinkedIn, it's Armand Curet as well. So you should be able to find me on LinkedIn. And also, I have a book, Government Job Secrets. This might not be the time for it, but you might as well get a copy. Amazon and Audible, you can get a copy so that you're ready to go in April. So when April hits, you can go ahead and start, cranking out the applications and, giving yourself the best possibility of getting a better job.
Well, I love that. I love that. And I have y'all should have multiple books. All my amazing GovCon winners and those who are new here. I'm Dr. Kizzy Parks, been awarded over 50 million contracts, government contracting book here. GovCon Winners Way on Amazon. It's also on winnerswaybook.com. Winnerswaybook.com. And it's easy. And I think that's in my opinion, what you're offering and what your channel's offering is an easy way. You're taking all of this that can be confusing, even as someone served our country in the military, or even as someone has had a job or is currently in a position with the federal government, and you make it easy for them because people get overwhelmed, especially those who have done none of the above and they're like USAJOBS, and it's very frightening for them. So I love that you provide a guide. So check out his book, check out his channel, check out his LinkedIn. Y'all already know about winnerswaybook.com, winnerswaybook.com. Please keep coming back because you upload quite regularly. Do you upload every day?
Well, that's recent because of the news. I really wasn't even covering the news that much. I was just focused on how to do your resume, how to do the interview, how to find your job series, find your match. And then all of a sudden, this new administration comes in and they're making these moves like, within one day, there could be 2 or 3 big things that pop off. And a lot of people are asking me questions. They're concerned about it. They want to know, what my perspective is on it. So I cover the topics right now that impact directly to the federal workforce. So I think this week is back. Let's say last year, it was 3 times a week, and that was it. This year, it seems like since January 20th, I've been doing probably 4 or 5 a week. I don't know if I'm going to sustain that tempo, but I've been doing about 4 or 5 a week.
That's amazing. Well, I love that. And I appreciate it because as a contractor, we work alongside with government employees, and we've been involved in contracted engagements, helping government employees with employment. I've amazing experts that help with that. And so I just really appreciate what you do because I've seen how helpful what you do, what it does for people. So please, everybody, check out our mom. Go on LinkedIn, and especially those that have been longtime followers. Y'all know how much I love LinkedIn. It's largely overlooked in the government space. Most of the agencies have an account, and I would also say go on X too. A lot of agencies are on X right now, and they're going to continue to be on X. There's a lot of late breaking news on X. both for employees, people who are maybe potentially interested in being an employee, as well as contractors. And like, subscribe, hit the notification button for my channel, for his channel also. And as always, everything is possible. I love and adore you all. And thank you again, Armand, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all. Everything is possible.